I was gonna bring up Polium or Polium. Do you hear about this shit?
Don't ever say that shit to me again.
No, I have no idea what that is.
I just got back from the doctor. I really don't want to get into my Polium. Of course, we knew it was coming. It's the NFT blockchain console. And as you can imagine, it's off to a really good start.
I think I just got dumber.
The first thing they did was totally rip off the GameCube logo. But instead of a G, it's a P. So it's basically just kind of upside down.
All right.
They're also claiming and they stole art from like a new game coming out and just like very poorly photoshopped over it. Like different logos. There's like this game coming out called Krata or something, and they just like straight up took the art from that game and put a different title over it and like stamped characters over it.
Yeah, it's like I'm not even surprised. No, it's just like, well, let's start off a really sketchy product by doing stuff really sketch.
Well, because you know that it's a grift. There's no actual money in it, so of course they're gonna.
No.
Like, you're just trying to get people to buy pre. It's like the Fire Fest of video game consoles. They also claimed 8K. They claimed it has 8K HDR, ray tracing, and supports 120 frames per second. And this is like a streaming box. Like,
yeah.
No, it doesn't. You're full of shit.
Yeah. Okay.
The best part is there's a whole bunch of, if you go on Twitter and you find one of their posts, it's just loaded with these very newly created NFT profile picture accounts. They're like typing in generic shit, spelling errors, like, oh, the hardcore gaming's going to love this. It's so fucking transparent.
It was made by bots.
Yeah. It's just
designed to steal your money. Yeah.
Exactly.
It really is all trash.
You getting one?
Absolutely.
The controller comes with a wallet button.
A wallet button?
A wallet button.
Like,
so you can quickly access your wallet while in a game.
Nice. I mean, that's exactly what I need for my in-game purchases. My in-game NFT purchases.
That's what's missing from my PS5 controller. I was like, where's the wallet button? You imbeciles. Needless to say, people, if you're listening to us, and I don't know if you are, but if you are, do not buy anything related to this. I wouldn't even recommend buying a game system that you haven't heard of that's coming out in this year because it's probably a giant scam.
More than likely.
But that's not what we're going to be covering today. Today, we are officially kicking off our Best of the 90s bracket.
Yay!
So welcome back to the Nerding Grounds. Thank you for stopping by again. This is a weekly video game podcast where we discuss 90s video games, and we're going to be pitting them against each other in random matchups. We have put together an awesome bracket. And I'm just hoping it makes less sense as it goes on. That's my plan for this. And yeah, we're just going to be going seed by seed and deciding the winner. And this is very likely going to take, I don't know, maybe 3 episodes, something like that, if I had to guess. But we'll just see how long it goes, and then we're gonna try to make a series out of this, and later down the line, may do a 2000s and 2010s and things like that. So this is gonna be fun. Just a reminder from last week, this is no, tried and true list. We picked some of our favorites. We picked some of the ones that we just remembered fondly and some that we just remembered. So this is just kind of a, hodgepodge of 1990s video games. So I am going to be adding the bracket list to the podcast description. So anybody that wants to check out all 64 games in our list can follow through there and check it out. All right. So seed number 1, Matt, we have Donkey Kong Country 2 versus Resident Evil 2. Already, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, right? Like, Those are two widely different video games.
Widely
And
and wildly, I
yeah,
would say.
both.
See
Yeah,
both.
yeah. I don't, I don't know. Like we have to start off with one of the hardest pairings.
I don't think I ever beat Donkey Kong Country 2. Definitely beat the first one. I feel like with 2, the level design was just kind of amped up. You could run around with Diddy and
Dixie.
Dixie Kong. Yeah, so Diddy and Dixie Kong, you kind of have like that. There's a lot more emphasis on the partner aspect of it, which is really fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the setting is very tropical Caribbean pirate ish, and so I feel
Sounds
like they
right up
just
your alley.
yeah. Yeah, I just think there's more identity to this one than the first one. I mean, the first one was just kind of impressive from a technical standpoint, and it was a fun 2D platformer. And yeah, and then Resident Evil 2, the remake obviously it's hard to compare just because it's so updated, even though it's faithful in spots. But the original 2, I felt, still holds up from that entire game is just one big puzzle piece. And I know the first
Right.
game is similar with the mansion and everything, but that police station just works like this big jigsaw puzzle. Is like once you find something, it fits somewhere else. It doesn't feel like a series of puzzles. It feels like one giant multifaceted puzzle that you're unlocking more and more of as you go on. And I think that still is so impressive to this day.
Uh, yeah. I mean, both were, I guess, I don't want to say improvements, but built up on what made their predecessors great. If we're trying to like compare or decide which one particularly moves on here, I don't know. I would want to say I would want to give it to Donkey Kong Country 2 here, just because like Resident Evil 2. Well, I mean, is it held as high as Resident Evil 1 is?
For me, it is. I don't know. For me, Resident Evil 1, it introduces so many classic elements, but with 2, while it's still campy and it still has tank controls, and I feel like it's just more of a realized game. Like it knows what it wants. It knows what it wants the characters to be. And it's telling a story about those characters more than it is telling a story about a virus outbreak, which I feel like is what's going on in the first one. And yeah, and I mean I love what Donkey Kong Country 2 did, but I don't know. I feel like we wouldn't have the survival horror genre where it is now without Resident Evil 2.
Is it 2 that really did that though?
I think so because 3, I feel like went into more an action
Yeah, well,
centric
which what
genre,
they
and
love to
yeah,
seem to do, basically.
yeah,
They make it more horror, slow paced, and then the next 2 games are more and more actiony, right?
yeah,
And then they reset.
yeah, yeah. But I don't know, like, and you gotta also think about this. 2 is where you started off, like you were brought into the city. And what do you think about when you go to Resident Evil? It's like Raccoon City is one of the first things that pops up, right?
Right.
Like, yes, you have the mansion, but it's mostly about the city and bombing the city. And there's
Yeah.
this whole like night where Leon and Claire are trying to escape, like get to the police station, figure out, where Chris is, figure out how to get out, and yeah, and all this stuff is going on around them.
But at the same time, like, the mansion is more like mystery, and you really know nothing. You're kinda trying to
Yeah.
figure out what is this place that's, like, so ridiculously famous now. I guess now we're comparing Resident Evil 1 to 2.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I see what you're saying is you're trying to argue I guess, the overall significance of
yeah.
Resident Evil 2 versus the overall significance of Donkey Kong Country 2?
Yeah, that's what I'm basically getting at. Because
Yeah. We're gonna run into both Resident Evil 1 and Donkey Kong Country 1 as well. But if we're talking about the significance, I mean, like, was it as significant? I personally think Resident Evil 2, I personally think that's more of a significant game than 1, but that's mostly, like, my colored opinion.
yeah,
I have a I beat my head against 1 a lot more.
we can just vote on it, move on.
What are you going with?
I think I will go with Resident Evil 2. Yeah, just for like, you know what? If I'm thinking about the franchise as a whole, I mean, Resident Evil is Donkey Kong's still going, right? But Resident Evil is definitely still going, still making like impacts. So I think it's just more important to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm gonna decide Resident Evil 2 here.
I am also going with Resident Evil 2 just because sometimes you gotta go with, like, what am I gonna pick up if both of these are in front of me right now? I
Yeah,
don't know.
Resident Evil 2, right?
Yeah.
Hands down. It's not like it's a bad game, you know. I just
So I guess another, condition to this that we should mention is that we had our friend Blaine, and this was for, like, tie-breaking purposes. We had our friend Blaine and my wife Sierra, add in some answers to basically vote for the tiebreaker if we ever encountered a tie. Let's just for fun see what Blaine voted for. Donkey Kong Country 2. So if you'd gone with that, it would have won. So
well, you're wrong, Blaine.
all right, so Resident Evil 2 is going to move on, and unfortunately, Donkey Kong Country 2 falls. All right, moving on to seed number 2, we have Crash Bandicoot versus Pokemon Silver and Gold. Another very sensible mashup that,
Yeah, totally. Right.
it's essentially the same game.
And then yeah. No, absolutely.
I know where I'm leaning on this because one of these is probably my favorite of the series. I guess I would all I would say is Crash Bandicoot,
Yeah.
was definitely a unique experience. But if you have other stuff to say, I'll let you talk on it.
So, was Crash Bandicoot a good game, or was it just the only platformer PlayStation really had at the time?
That's how I feel.
I remember
Recently,
they promoted the crap out of that game. It
I
was
mean, they
everywhere.
wanted a mascot, right?
Yeah. So, and that's what it was trying to be PlayStation's Mario, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and for all that, I haven't played it that much, right? And it's like I've had the opportunity, I've played it, but if I had sat there and played it all the way through, God no. You know, if I'm gonna go play a platformer at that time, there was a lot of other choices that were good.
The running toward the camera is an
Yeah,
interesting choice, but it was never anything that I appreciated. I didn't mind the side-scrolling ones. It just always came down to it, like, that game was hard.
it was.
Like, it was so challenging, and that's
I
what
mean,
always put me off of it.
a lot of old platformers were though, right? You know, and if I really think back to a lot of the platformers in that time, because there was starting to be so many,
It was a
they were,
mascot off. It was just everybody
yeah,
was trying to come out with a mascot.
a lot of them were weird and
Gex?
yeah, and not fun, kind of hard, right? Yeah, and you
Or
know,
just, like, thrown together with cheap assets to hurry up and get a title out, and
yeah,
crammed with a bunch of obnoxious jokes.
emphasis on obnoxious.
I
Uh,
will say, though, I think Crash Bandicoot is looked at a little more fondly,
right, because
than,
it's
those we just mentioned.
if I think about that compared to some of the other platforms, I think it remained in scope a lot better, and was just a better built game, right?
Yeah,
It
I
was
mean, they just came out with one last year that was very highly regarded as
right,
a platformer in 2021.
which is crazy.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I mean, it looked fun, but again, it was not my style of
that being
platform.
said, we are actually have the I don't even think we mentioned it's currently against Pokemon Silver and Gold. Uh,
Yeah,
so we're
yeah,
talking about the second entry in
which
the
is my
Pokemon franchise.
which is still my favorite Pokemon game. In a lot of the ways the series peaked there. I mean, just with how the regions ran and the progression of the story, which I don't really go to Pokemon for the story, but this one actually I felt had a decent narrative going on, and especially traveling back to the region from the first game at the end, and you're just kind of shocked. You're like, oh my god, there's a whole second part to this game. I now
Right.
take my overpowered Pokemon and just run rampant through the first through the first game.
And I feel like any Pokemon game to date that had more of a narrative, I've definitely enjoyed. And I guess they all kind of do, but they can be really slow to kind of ramp up towards
Yeah.
whatever the main theme, you know.
This with Team Rocket kind of just doing their weird, shady operations. It had more to it than just your standard get to the Elite Four and beat the Elite Four. And they had things like day and night cycle, the Poke Gear with your phone that you could call people re-challenge trainers, and the way that items were you could use items in your inventory. They weren't all just like put in one giant bag. Like everything was a lot more user friendly in that game.
Wait, did they have re-challenge trainers?
Yeah, they would call you on the phone and they would be like, "Hey, I want to battle again," and you just go back to that route and they would battle you again, and their Pokemon were a little stronger. And
But Silver and Gold, it's definitely not one that I've played like as much as some of the other ones. So I can't really say it's like my favorite in the series. That being said, I mean you just named out the list of different stuff that they kind of added and innovations that they made to the series.
I know they technically do it, but they got lazy after this, right? I mean, Ruby and Sapphire had a lot to it,
Yeah.
but generations after that, I just kept getting less and less invested because it
Yeah.
really just felt like a cash grab at that point. This felt like a real development from the first game.
Right. And I don't, a lot of it could just be. I mean, we played that when we were, red and blue when we were children,
Hmm.
and it was the best thing ever, and it was everywhere. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
everywhere, but I mean, like you were a kid, you owned Pokemon cards, and you probably owned the game too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, as we got older, that just kind of just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't tell if these things are just different or if I'm just looking for that magic.
I think it's a little bit of both. If they had treated the series with more nuance and, you know, didn't just coast on the fact that they knew people would buy all of them and they never
Yeah.
really had to try that hard. I mean, look at Sword and Shield. I think Sword and Shield as a game doesn't even compare to Silver and Gold just
Right.
because it's just so by the numbers and lazy, and their idea of an open world is not an open world and
No.
is unnecessary. And
But anyway, back on topic. Crash
let
Bandicoot versus Pokemon Silver and Gold. Who wins? Go.
I'm voting Pokemon.
I'm gonna vote Pokemon.
All right. So for funsies, let's see what Blaine picked. Pokemon. So unanimous over here. So Pokemon Silver and Gold advances to round 2. And it's going to go up against Resident Evil 2, which is a little tougher for me, I'm not going to lie. Moving on to seed 3, we have Super Smash Brothers versus Sonic the Hedgehog, the
Yeah,
OG.
F me for this one.
No, I immediately said I was like, ah, ha,
Yeah.
ha, ha.
I mean, Super Smash Bros. Was just like, you mean to tell me they're bringing characters from different franchises
Oh, it
like
was crazy.
Mario and Pikachu, and they're gonna kick the shit out of each
And
other?
Goku right in there.
What? I don't, I don't, I don't think Goku was there.
You played the wrong one.
I think you're talking about like hack versions of that.
Yes,
I mean, I'll look up the roster right now. All
I
right.
swear to God, it was 8 people.
Yeah. Now it's like if you ever go back and play, you're like, really? Is this literally the only people that they had?
Oh, that's so fun going back to like the last generation of Smash Bros. And with the new roster in mind, which is like, I don't know, up to 700 now, you're just like, oh, this, like, when I went back and looked at Melee, I was like, this looks small compared to Brawl. This is insane.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but yeah, original Super Smash Bros. Nintendo 64. I think you could, once you unlock the 4 characters, it was 12 people altogether. Yeah. Yeah, it was like
I'd say
12 fighters.
that's all we needed, right?
Right. But it was great. You
Uh,
remember the commercial?
I was literally gonna mention that commercial because that's one of the greatest commercials of all time.
They're walking through the field in
Yeah.
their big mascot costumes, and you start beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah, they're like frolicking with daisies
What is it?
in their hands.
Mario,
Yeah.
Donkey Kong, Pikachu, and Link, maybe?
No, no, no. It was Yoshi.
Yoshi. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it was crazy. It was like one of those things you never thought, you know, you never thought any company, much less Nintendo, would commit to just mashing all their franchises into one. And now you look at it and it's like it's not even just their franchises, it's anything that Nintendo's ever touched, even by a technicality, can
Yeah.
find its way into. I mean, you can make, I think there are more Fire Emblem characters than the roster in the first game at this point. I don't.
Oh yeah, probably so. I mean, there's a lot, right? Yeah. Look at where the franchise has gone. It's crazy.
And
Uh,
I want to say, like, as someone who has always had challenges with fighting games in terms of memory and just getting those movements down and being able to like withstand the pressure of playing a fighting game with someone where your reflexes have to be super tight and you have to remember all of these button combinations. Super Smash Bros was like that was my arena. Like I could play that. It was approachable for anybody.
yeah.
Um and
Well,
yeah, and it felt good.
yeah, they did. They simplified it, and then in a way that it was still it still has its complexities, right? But it was very inviting for everyone. And I
Yeah.
think that was always the point. That was the point from the get go. I mean, that's probably why uh, the guy that produces all of them, or the lead
Sakurai?
designer. Yeah, he never wanted it to be like a tournament fighter sort of thing.
He was a Kirby dev. I watched
Really?
something recently, and like, yeah, he was just he was leading a lot of like Kirby development, and I think this was his first because this was HAL Laboratories at first, which was the Kirby developer, and this was his first kind of branch out, and I think he had to fight tooth and nail to get this game created, and he didn't even expect to make more of them.
Well, it worked, right?
He was like, yeah, I just want to make this one. It's cool. It was a demo for a long time of just like a few fighters, and then he had to convince Nintendo to let him paste their character skins over it.
I don't know. Pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because the I guess the head honchos over at Nintendo were wrong.
Well, it's
Like
like a
they didn't want to do
flagship
it. Yeah,
title now.
yeah, right.
You
It
know,
was
like
huge.
it's bought. It runs numbers up there with Mario, like Breath of the Wild and Odyssey and
Yeah.
Mario Kart and stuff. What do you want to say about Sonic the Hedgehog numero uno?
So, like Sonic the Hedgehog 1, was it a good game? Not really. Not compared to the things that come after.
Oh
But
yeah,
did I mean that is Sega's Mario, right? That is
it was their answer to Mario in the 90s.
right. And that is still a huge freaking franchise. I mean that is like without Sonic, what does Sega have? I mean, it started a lot of things for Sega and put them. I think it really helped put them on the map.
I mean, it
Um,
started the console wars. It was
yeah,
literally Sega versus Nintendo because there was this mascot with an attitude that was versing Mario, and you want to be faster and you want to be cooler and edgier, play Sonic. You know, it was marketed as at the, you know, early teens to older teens, and that was the
right.
way.
I mean, you know me. Like, I obviously love. I always loved Sonic.
You
I
were the
don't know
reason I
why.
played Sonic.
Right.
I was a
Uh,
Nintendo kid only.
yeah. And for some reason, I don't know. My first console was a Sega Genesis. It's definitely a tough choice here. Because again, like I don't know, it's Sonic 1, like the first game. I mean, I just don't feel like there was that much there.
It was
Um,
an
I like,
introduction to
yeah,
a handful of mechanics. You know, you spun and sprinted and like went through loops and all this stuff. But you know, you don't have a lot of like the spin dash and all those things, like you said, what came later, the level design, the branching level design, and
Yeah, the boss fights and
there are levels in Sonic 1 that just suck to play. That, for all their Green Hill Zone uh, pushes out there in the beginning, like, oh, look how fast this is, look how many loops you're hitting. You get to later levels, and it's like you've come to a standstill of platforming that's just as slow as Mario. But Sonic is not Mario. He's glidey and unwieldy. And
yeah,
so, like, trying to do tight platforming in those areas kind of just pisses me off, if I'm being honest. I usually jump past 1 and go to 2 and 3 when I
right.
replay them.
There isn't a platformer that has ever felt, or a side scroller, I should say. Like it moves very, very. I mean, it's Sonic, right? So this sounds a little redundant to say, but it does move very like fast, as opposed to anything else, except for maybe certain instances in Mario, that are more like deliberate.
Yeah.
Sonic was just like, I'm just gonna, run through the level.
It kind of urges you to just keep moving forward
Right.
instead of trying to double back and make sure you collected every little thing. It's like, I'm just gonna get to the level this way. And
Makes me wonder if it was all like deliberate to do that, if they were really trying to like reach for that feel, like, okay, you as a player, you're gonna want to like figure out how quickly you can zip through these levels.
yeah, I think they were trying to contradict Mario in any way. I mean, like, not that Mario isn't about speed, but
Like it
you know,
is, but it definitely doesn't like if I'm going fast in Mario, it feels like I'm glitching the game and skipping a bunch of shit.
we can vote on this. I'm gonna go with Super Smash.
I gotta go with Super Smash Bros.
Okay.
Because it was it was like legendary, you know? It was the coolest thing ever. Uh Sonic, as a franchise in general, I love, but Sonic the Hedgehog, like the first game, first Super Smash Bros. I think Super Smash Bros. Was just way more.
More of
Made a
just
bit
an
with bigger
experiment.
impact on me. Yeah, for an experiment, it made a bigger impact on me.
Well, let's see. And just for good measure, Blaine also voted for Super Smash. So we have
Yeah, that was
another
good.
unanimous
I feel
victory.
dirty.
There are, Sonic's kind of loaded in here, so you will have more chances. And eventually we're going to disagree on something.
I mean, I see the list. I know the next one. It's just as hard. So
This one is hard. So Super Smash Bros. Is going to advance to round 2. And in number 4 seed, we have Super Street Fighter 2, or I guess Street Fighter 2 Turbo would be the proper name, versus Super Metroid. Both Super Nintendo titles. Oh boy.
yeah, oh boy,
To
indeed.
say that these are important is kind of an understatement.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of those conversations are always leaning that way for me about like what was more important at the time. I can't really make that distinction
Well,
for most of them, but
both of these came out, or I guess if you're looking at the turbo version of Street Fighter 2, I think Street Fighter 2 came out the year before, but 94 is when both of these were around. Street Fighter was kind of a staple in the arcade
yeah,
already before it came home. But then when they, put the turbo version out and it was a little more responsive, it felt more like that arcade fighter.
which I think that was actually pretty big for the idea of playing
That was
fighting games at
big.
home, right? Yeah, because I
I
mean
mean, you
before
had
that
Mortal
you
Kombat.
yeah, you can kind of debate this all day, but for people that were used to playing fighting games at the arcade with the joysticks and like those controllers as opposed to like a Super Nintendo controller, these are like very, very different things. Like very, very different.
And I feel like Street Fighter was just such a cultural phenomenon. Just everybody was always talking about Street Fighter. Hadouken was always being uttered. I mean, like before Kamehameha, There was Hadouken. That's
Yeah.
what people were yelling on the playground, and then it was Kamehameha.
Right. And it's
Um,
still big today. I mean, we're still
yeah.
talking about, you know.
Well, 6 is about to come out,
Yeah.
and it finally looks like the Street Fighter game that people have been waiting for the
Right.
last couple years.
Yeah.
Um, but on the other side of this, you have Super Metroid, and
I,
how,
you know,
how
legendary. It is. It's another like legendary title. What are you gonna do without Super Metroid?
and it's not even like this was the game in the Metroid series that created the idea of, I want to say Metroidvania, but I mean, like, I feel like Metroid was responsible for the Metroidvania genre. Castlevania explored it a little bit
Castlevania,
after.
yeah. Well, and I think Castlevania had a lot of like cool ideas, and it definitely brought a lot of things to the table. And when we're talking about Metroidvania, but yeah, I think you're right. Metroid brought Metroidvania.
And Super Metroid specific. I mean, Metroid on the NES and Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, yes, they had elements of this exploration and stuff, but I mean, you're talking Super Metroid, just the upgrades you're finding, the way you get the missiles, super missiles, mega bombs, and like you're just constantly the whole point of that game is uncovering secrets.
Right,
Every room you go into has multiple hidden panels that you blow up, and then you can find all these different things,
right.
and the
Mm.
upgrades like in my recent experience, the upgrades go so much further than I remember.
Yeah, they do
I mean,
actually.
at the end of that game, you're just like you don't even touch the ground. You're like
No, no,
sprinting through
yeah,
and space jumping through everything and destroying everything.
yeah,
You have like 30 health tanks. It's insane.
it is. But you know, maybe kind of need that for the last boss.
Hmm.
I think Metroid was more accessible. Like it was the easier to play game for if you're not used to playing those type of video games. Um, you
But do
know,
you
like
think it's the one that
Metroidvania.
people went for more?
I think so, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
remember at the time, but it's certainly the one that I went for. And like I played Castlevania and it being seeming felt it was way more sluggish, right? But it felt like harder in that sense, always.
Yeah.
Um,
I was compelled for a moment to say that like Street Fighter 2 may have, I don't know, like could have been more important just because you're talking about the multiplayer aspect and
right. I almost forgot what we were doing here for a second, talking about Super Metroid. It's like, oh yeah, we're not debating Super Metroid and Castlevania.
right?
Yeah, Street Fighters in here. Oh
Oh
my
shit,
god.
that's right.
Yeah. Oh,
I know it's gonna be. That's not the first time we're gonna get knocked off track because
yeah,
this
yeah.
is so
It,
confusing.
it is, right? And it's I don't know. You know, I think this is just an easy pick, right?
I do too.
But for gaming, I don't know. You know, hey, hopefully someone can explain to us why we're wrong because I'm going with Super Metroid.
I am also going with Super Metroid. I've already explained that fighting games are not necessarily my thing. While I do appreciate Street Fighter 2 Turbo, 10 times out of 10 I'm gonna pick Super Metroid. It's too important.
Yeah.
And Blaine thought the same. Oh no, wait, no, I'm sorry. This vote was from Sierra.
Ah,
Thank you, Sierra. You're very wise.
did Blaine really leave that one blank?
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. I gotta ask.
Maybe he couldn't. Yeah, because if he was having the same internal dialogue
He
that
just
we were
couldn't figure
having,
it
yeah,
out.
yeah.
I don't know. Why would you make me do this?
That's what I'm feeling right now in general. Like, why would you make me do this?
I'm sorry. I thought it was a good idea. All right. So Super Metroid is going to advance to round two, and it's going to be going up against Super Smash Brothers. Jesus Christ. Um, Going to the fifth seed, we have Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow versus Secret of Mana. So we're talking Game Boy versus Super Nintendo.
We're talking about a role-playing game that came out around the time of every great role-playing game that exists.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you talking about Secret of Mana?
yes.
Okay.
I get that Pokemon is too, right? But
I just had to make sure because that's
I,
what I was thinking too.
what time did Monster Hunter come out? Not Monster Rancher.
Jeez.
I mean, as far as I know, that's like the first of its kind, if anything like that ever. And
Oh
then
yeah, for sure. And that whole
made
idea of like collect them and trade with your friends. And I mean like connecting your like you could do that in Pokemon in the original Pokemon, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Versus
yeah, taking that RPG and expanding it to like multiplayer, just that alone, even if you're including Final Fantasy and all the other RPGs, that's
right.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like not necessarily for me personally. This is definitely more of like a. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, I loved Red, Red and Blue. Um, I mean, just so we were talking about everything. It was like everything when we were kids.
Yeah.
Um, as opposed to Secret of Mana, which, yeah, I mean, I would say good RPG, right? But nothing in comparison to at least the impact of Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow.
Definitely not. But what I will say in Secret of Mana's favor is that as far as combat and all of that, that game has it's aged way better. If you go back and play Red, Blue, and Yellow, those games are a slog. I mean, they're
Yeah,
just like everything takes forever to complete. And at this point, playing the first generation Pokemon game, you kind of have to just go with Fire Red, Leaf Green because I don't know, just like they feel obsolete at this point. And we talked about this during the remakes episode, but like they do have that obsolete thing going on. While Secret of Mana just got remastered and came out in a collection, and like that game still holds up. The combat still feels good, kind of like a Game Boy Advance game. But God, I mean, I just can't deny how big of a part of my
yeah.
life Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow was.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
I can't even. I mean, I mean, sure. If I go back and play Secret of Mana, I'm sure I'm gonna like that a hell of a lot more than I like Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. I
yeah,
mean, remind me to add that to the list because I have that remake for the Switch. Sitting in my drawer right now. It's like no contest for me, and
yeah,
I even think that for me, aimed for just video games, right? Because again, Pokemon Red, Blue were just
I know.
ginormous.
And Bleen feels the same way. So we got another unanimous, got another unanimous vote sending Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow to the next round. Sorry, Secret of Mana, you will be missed. Moving on to the number 6 seed, we have Pokemon Snap for the N64 versus Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Genesis.
And once again, like I hate you.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, indeed. Because no, I mean, kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, I don't know if I could tell you how much I played Sonic the Hedgehog 2, right?
That's the one, right? Like when you go like Sonic the Hedgehog 1, like we said earlier, it's a nice trip down memory lane, but 2 is where that series got its legs, I feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you know,
Um,
just the
yeah,
movement, the inertia, the spin dash. You have control in a way that, a lot of my problems that I brought up with the first Sonic of just feeling a little unwieldy um and floaty are fixed because you just have so much control. If you get stopped, if you trip over something, if you run into a spike, you can recover in a way that you can't in the first game.
right.
And the level design is just infinitely better.
So yeah, I mean, it literally just took what was there in the first and then just added actual mechanics to the whole thing. Um, and then built better, a better world. Pokemon Snap, though, my God, did I love that game back in the day?
I still do.
Yeah, and I
I
think I don't even like the new one so much. I don't
I
know.
was really into it for a good bit there, and something caused me to fall off.
I feel like I'm running through like the levels multiple times to try to figure out like the secret stuff and get all the stuff. Which
I can't figure it out.
yeah, like yeah, it's
It shouldn't be that.
It feels obtuse in a way that shouldn't.
Yeah,
Like the first one was just so
perfect. Actually, right?
the first one was perfect. It was bite size. It was 10 levels. You knew how to run through it, but then there were those. Each mission had a set of few secrets where you could uncover something, go a different branching path. But it
Right.
felt, like we used to just get drunk and turn it on and beat it in a night because
Yeah.
that was what that game was, and see what you can get the best pictures. And it's like you said, you running through the levels over and over again in the new one, that was never a problem in the first game for some reason. It was just so charming that running through the river or the canyon for the 100th time, getting the same pictures but slightly better it was so
Literally
charming.
like hundreds of times. Like how many
Yeah.
times do we run through that game?
And what
Uh
an and like such an idea, Like you're essentially on one of those Disney theme park rides trying to just get these animals to react in different ways, and
right.
that's just such an interesting concept that
Yeah, like it's just an insanely good game. Um I think you're right. The right word is just charming, right?
Mhm.
It was just a charming game.
We got to make some headway, so let's vote on this one. What are you
Uh,
going with?
it's like another one that I feel like I'm gonna kick myself in the foot later because when we're done with this, I'm gonna go back and play Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and kind of realize how much I love that game. And the
Oh,
innovations that it made, but I gotta go with Snap on this one.
whoa! I did not expect that.
It's like I just loved Snap. Like I still have these vague memories in my mind of playing that game, trying to get Mew to appear and all that good stuff, and just how wonderful that all was.
I hear you. I'm going with the same, also Pokemon Snap, and Blaine picked the same. So, Pokemon Snap advances to verse in the round two, Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. That's gonna be weird. Moving on to the seventh seed, we have Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast versus
Excellent.
Metal Slug.
Yeah, Sonic Adventures next.
Yeah. I'd really I put Metal Slug in here thinking it might go up against something that could get we played Metal Slug in Pizza Hut, right? Like that was fun.
Yeah, no, but honestly, like it's gonna be tough for something else to beat Sonic Adventures. Not just for
It's
me,
Sonic
just in
Adventure
general.
was
I think
this
it was such a good game.
Do you remember just seeing that for the first time and
Yeah,
just
it
being
was.
like, "Holy shit, what are games doing? This is
Yeah,
crazy."
yeah, right. And we're talking about it before. It was a 2D side scroller, and then it moved. It managed to move into a 3D environment.
Which, so
That
did Mario 64. And I still think Mario 64 is one of the best games ever made and way better than Sonic Adventure. But at the time,
I would disagree. So let's hope they come up against each other at some point in time, right?
oh boy, I think we
Like,
know what
yeah,
wins this category
yeah,
or this seed. And Blaine thought the same. So, all right, Sonic Adventure advances to round two. Eighth seed is The Secret of Monkey Island versus Diddy Kong Racing. So Monkey Island was a DOS Windows game. Um, Diddy Kong Racing was on the N64.
yeah. I mean, I'll start off by saying two things. A, I've never played the Secret of Monkey Island.
Hmm.
And that B, when we release this in the next episode, you hear my door kicked open and Sharif strangling me to death. It's because I
You
didn't
voted
choose.
against it.
Yeah, I voted against it, right? But uh I don't know. I mean, isn't it pirate themed, right? I mean, it's definitely a pirate
It's
themed,
a pirate adventure um, narrative game.
a cult classic, right? Like a
Yeah,
lot of people love that game.
yeah, and I have a soft spot for it, though I came in contact with it way later in life, and I
Yeah.
more have played it as a novelty because as much as I am into pirates, I had to play Monkey Island.
Wait, you're into
Um,
pirates?
Pirates are in this year. Um, yeah, like I played it because I had to, and I like it, and I think it's funny, and I love adventure games. Like it reminds me of that was the only thing I could do on my computer in the 90s was play
Yeah.
those CD-ROM adventure games, the point and clicks. So yeah, there is a lot of nostalgia for that style of game. I just wish I had run it. Like somebody should have given me Monkey Island when I was a kid.
Right.
It might actually be a challenge here. But Diddy Kong Racing, I put
Can we
so
talk
much time
about Diddy
into.
Kong Racing right now?
We can talk about Diddy Kong Racing.
Because that game was amazing.
And it didn't even dawn on me until later that,
Why haven't they made a new one of those? My God.
that's
It had so much going for it.
Rare. Rare didn't work on a lot of stuff for a really long time, remember? Like they had to reform, I believe. So I really think it was just a
Yeah.
studio issue.
Yeah, I mean,
And a lot of those properties just went in a bunch of different directions.
yeah, no, you're right. I mean, who knows? So,
But I mean, like, what was the main? Like, this was the answer. It wasn't even a competitor because I mean, it was. I guess I don't know. It was like Mario Kart 64 was huge, and then Diddy Kong Racing came out, and that was the other kart racer.
and well, I mean, there was just a lot there. It kind of felt like it had some of the explorative aspects of.
Like a collectathon or a 3D platformer, right?
Yeah, so I mean, here we have like racing game, but just way more of those like collectible platformer aspects that we really enjoyed from every other title that was kind of coming out.
Well, yeah, I'm like I remember spending hours in that overworld in
Yeah,
between the races and just okay. So I
which was
don't feel like
just cool.
it was cool. I don't feel like doing a race right now, so I'll go uncover secrets, like go through this waterfall, make this jump, and you could freely change from plane to car to that hoverboat. And
And
yeah, you were just going around collecting balloons to unlock new races, and there was just this story adventure progression to it that you could win the cups and get gold in Mario Kart, but there wasn't this
it was
3D
nothing.
adventure aspect to it.
Yeah, which I mean, I still don't. Probably wasn't even done again until like Need for Speed Underground, where you actually have a progression to go with I stupid, right?
What a comparison.
Yeah, I mean, you tell me. I mean, I guess there's technically progression in things like oh my god, Gran Turismo, right? But not in a simple sense at all.
Gran Turismo is really the Mario Kart of the
Yeah, right. And Need for Speed is the Diddy
Diddy
Kong
Kong
Racing.
Racing. Oh my god.
Oh my god. Uh, well, I like doing things for a purpose, even if
Yeah. We love our sense of progression, and that's
yeah,
really where it is. And and that's not we haven't even talked about the levels. There, everything was themed like that 3D platformer style. Like the formula went through the levels where if you were in this area, you were in like a dinosaur land where there's skeletons everywhere and desert. In this area, it's snowy, and so every race you're doing is like ice and snow and that. And then there's like a jungle situation. Mario Kart would just kind of travel through a bunch of unique levels in a cup, but Diddy Kong had that like that Banjo Kazooie style of world changing, going
right.
through different zones and stuff.
Yeah, which Banjo Kazooie definitely did that well too, right?
Yeah, yeah. It
Um,
was there was continuity to the worlds you were going to.
where other platforms. So I guess it was just a rare thing. They had that down right, right?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I'm gonna go with Diddy Kong Racing for this one.
Diddy Kong Racing.
I do want to shout out Monkey Island. I think it's great, and I'm really excited about the new one coming out. Even though people online are being terrible and harassing developers, don't harass developers.
Yeah, I will never understand that. They really don't. I mean, they're doing their job. Of course, they're passionate about it and they're artists. But at the end of the day, it's other people that make decisions.
Yeah, and you know what? You're not gonna always like an art style.
In fact, don't harass anybody that's
Don't
just
harass
doing their job
anybody except like I don't know people.
unless they deserve it.
Yeah, maybe Supreme Court. Anyway, Diddy Kong Racing advances, and it's going to be going up against Sonic Adventure. Moving on to the ninth seed. Oh, and Blaine felt the same. So,
Yeah.
and moving on to the ninth seed, we have Super Mario World versus The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. This was almost a really, really fucked up category.
Yeah. Right. Almost.
Zelda almost made this a huge challenge.
God, Super Mario World, right?
That's the
Um,
game. That's the game right there.
that is the game. Is that when the like dun, 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 that kind of is the quintessential Mario for a lot of people. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because that's the
Um,
SNES breakout Mario. That was the system seller.
yeah.
It wasn't the first Mario with an overworld, but it like did the overworld in a really
It did.
incredible way. It
Yeah.
he introduced
That
Yoshi, all those different outfits, the cape.
right. So all these just really cool other aspects and mechanics to the
Yeah,
game that are yeah, the world was great, wasn't it? Like the map. I still like that map.
it's
Um,
awesome. Yeah,
it is.
and speaking of that continuity, this was the Mario. This was the 2D Mario that did have, I think, that flavor that each area you went to kind of piggybacked off of the ones around it a little bit. Like there was some through lines in those. It wasn't just a bunch of challenging levels put back to back. And again, like this was the Mario that I played that felt like an adventure game. It didn't feel just like 10 worlds back to back that you had to get through. And they were meant to like just beat you back. This felt like an adventure game, like you were going and discovering and collecting things.
Yeah.
And that
No,
was
it,
what it
it
was.
definitely like moved the title forward into that sense where yeah, it just feels less of like an arcadey sort of thing and more of like, an actual pick up and, kind of save, come back later. You really want to beat game.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Um, yeah, and this was the one that fought against Sonic. So, I mean, they both had their style. I mean, this I just think this is one of the greatest games ever made.
Yeah. It's
Um,
definitely held as one, right? Uh, and for good reason. But
mhm.
then we also have Link's Awakening.
Link's Awakening gets an unfair rap, and I'm not just talking about because it was remade. And that game is excellent. That remake is really good. Um,
It looks really good. I never played it, but
it's
I need
fun.
to,
It's
I
fun.
think.
The
Yeah.
game the game is a little bit of an ass towards the middle and end where um I mean this was on Game Boy. This was on like the original Game Boy and it was eventually re-released on Game Boy Color um
I
in a
think probably
much
the first time I played it, right?
the DX version where the
Yeah.
like pink egg and everything. Yeah. Essentially the same game but just a little more refreshed and I think it's fine looking at that version because it's pretty much the same thing. But yeah, there's there's just some aspects of it. Like once you get to the middle of the game, toward the late game, um, there are things in there that are just so oddly just jammed in. Like how puzzle solutions that like are so not obvious. How are you supposed to figure it out? It's like you have to bring this exact item to this person, and that person's going to tell you something that you can tell this person. But it doesn't feel obvious. And even in the new one, you go play the new one, and that same issue is there. You're like, I have to look up a guide for this because there's no way I could know to look in this one specific patch of grass to find this item. You know?
Like the whole not maybe puzzle wise, but the whole game always felt kind of like obtuse in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
You're never really sure what to do. Well, at least when I was younger, right? Like I had no clue kind of where to go, what to do, and nothing ever really seemed obvious to the
Well,
point
at
where
age 31, I had the same problem. So what does that tell you?
poor game design, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, again, you encountered this kind of stuff when you were finding these like flagship titles that were brought to Game Boy.
Right.
They, and I mean, Link to the Past had issues like this too. They just weren't as game stunting, I guess. And I will say there was so much cool stuff here. Like you had those side scrolling sections and the items were really cool and the story was actually a story. I mean, you this was like a big like Link washes up and he's like it's a dream happening in like was like a fish's mind or something. I don't know. It's like a dream going on, and if by completing the game, you're like basically ending this world. Like that's what's happening, and like there's this big conundrum at the end. And it's just it's
Well,
an
that's pretty cool.
interesting story. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like it's got some cool stuff going on.
I mean, that does sound cool, right? As far as like back to the topic at hand, I think I'm gonna have to give this one to Super Mario World.
I'm gonna have
But
to
you
agree,
have
man.
me intrigued.
Yeah, and that's I think, even if we just kind of unanimously pick most of the I think it's gonna get harder as we get into the next rounds. We still get to like shed light on these games that are important. We still get to talk about Link's Awakening and Street Fighter and the original Sonics and stuff. It's like those are still important and we still get to talk about why we love those games. And I don't even have to
Which is
look.
kind of why we're here, right?
Yeah. Nostalgia.
Yeah. All right.
Talking about the games of the 90s. I don't even have to look. This is one of Blaine's favorite games of all time, so I know he's picking Super Mario World.
Really? Wasn't The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening? I'm pretty sure Blaine has said on multiple occasions how much he loves that game.
Blaine beat Super Mario World on the trip we took before my wedding. Just right there in the kitchen. All right, so Super Mario World advances. And let's see. For the number 10 seed, we are going to be looking at Final Fantasy VI versus Kirby Superstar. I think I know what's advancing here.
Yeah. Final Fantasy VI, right?
Yeah.
Kirby Superstar. I mean, it
It's
was
it's a sweet game. It's really fun.
yeah, right? It is. It was fun. Final Fantasy VI, or with that was 3 when it first came out in
And
the
that's what
States.
I picked, but I put the correct number just because
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, we all know by now, right? It was 6.
yeah, it's
Um,
6.
that's held. And it's not talked about as much as 7 or 10 or
But
some of
that
the other
game existing on the Super Nintendo, like think about that.
yeah, crazy.
That I think that was 5, 4 and 5 are they're pretty big Final Fantasy games, but like 6 that's the Final Fantasy that people
I feel
look
like it
to.
really brought in the I mean 4 did a lot of this too, but I really think it brought in a lot of the character development and
Yeah.
story and world building, right? Um that previous titles didn't really necessarily have.
Right, exactly. It just felt the story felt bigger than necessarily the game was.
Yeah.
It was and that's the first time I really saw, like a 2D top-down RPG doing something that big.
Yeah, as opposed to I mean, and Kirby is still, cute. Games are fun, but it's
Yeah, and
not
and I
really
like what Kirby does
comparable.
with the powers, and it kind of changes up the side-scrolling thing, and it's not a super challenging game, so it lets you just kind of have fun.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stack up against just what Final Fantasy VI did. Your character and the main character, at least Terra, like there was a woman in the lead role,
Yeah, that's true.
and that was cool. And they don't really do that in those games, aside from 10-2 and 13. And I think that's it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, nothing too much to be said about this one. It's definitely a Final Fantasy VI for me.
Yeah. I wonder what Blaine picked. I know Sierra voted on this one. And Sierra voted for Kirby and said, screw you, because she
Yeah.
knew what we were going to pick,
Yeah, of
apparently.
course. Well, maybe I got sick and tired of her using down B on Kirby.
Oh, now we're
Oh,
going back to Smash Bros.
yeah.
All right. We're probably going to wrap it up in a couple of seeds here because
Yeah, I mean, we're getting
we're getting far on, but let's see. So we have 32 in this first round. Let's get through a couple more just so we can possibly finish it. We can finish this first round the next episode. In round 2, Super Mario World and Final Fantasy VI are going to be going up together, which, oof, I don't even want to think about that right now.
yeah, honestly, some of these second tier things are gonna
That
be very interesting, really.
It's going to
Uh
get messed up there.
yeah. To the point where, you know what, I like kinda wanna hopefully take the time to run through some of this stuff a little bit to kinda refresh my mind.
That's a good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I think 64 games is a big calling to refresh, but
Actually,
cutting that in half, I think is a little bit better.
yeah.
Okay, so the 11th seed is going to be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater versus StarCraft. And that's the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater on the PlayStation 1 and StarCraft on PC.
Are we including Brood War into this?
It's an expansion, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, we'll just
Yeah, why
assume,
not?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that big
Let,
of a deal,
let's
depending on
go
you.
with like the complete entity of the game. I mean, with like Street Fighter 2 Turbo, I think this
Yeah,
is kind of the same thing, right?
yeah. Basically,
Um,
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Loved that game as a kid. I mean, we've talked about like the remake, recently and how great
genre
that is.
defining.
Yeah. Exactly. Genre defining is right. And there was so many titles that tried to like recreate that, like BMX and got everything. Anything and everything. I think they really tried to make into a Tony Hawk Pro Skater, but nothing
Yeah.
compared. Uh, it was just an excellent game, really fun.
Those first three were just incredible.
Yeah.
And this first one, yeah, I mean, it's a little rough around the edges today, but you can pop it on. It's so nostalgic between the music and the tricks and everything. It's like, yes, it's a little bare bones today because
Right.
it's on the PlayStation, but it's such a transport back to a time that I don't know. The cultural significance of Tony Hawk Pro Skater is just insane.
I don't remember if I talked about this when we were talking about like the remake and stuff like that, but my first introduction to the game, because remember I didn't have PlayStation 1 for the longest time.
Yeah.
Um but I would go to Walter's house and I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure
Yeah.
he had a demo, right? That
Uh-huh.
was just the first level. And spend hours upon hours just running through that.
You know what's funny? When they released a demo for the remake and they only released that first level, the warehouse. And that in
That's pretty
itself
great. Yeah.
was kind of nostalgic. It's like,
Right?
oh, we just get a level to mess
I
around
should
in.
actually just I should download that and played it for like hours and hours. And it actually became a lot about like, well, so what's like this optimal run for like the
Hmm.
highest score? Like it was the idea of something you never really do anymore, especially as an adult. It's like, how can I make this my own little game?
Until Tony Hawk Remake came out and I was speed running again. And I was like,
Yeah,
I don't do this.
right.
But
Um,
okay, I'll do it.
so Tony Hawk Pro Skater, fantastic game, in a lot of ways. But then StarCraft.
Don't you
My
do it.
god, it's StarCraft.
Don't you do it, you bad,
I
bad man.
I mean, like, let's take Warcraft, right, and actually make it, good. Uh,
Hey. See, we don't even have to talk about Tony Hawk. This is where we differ on Warcraft
yeah.
versus StarCraft. Like, as far as
So,
the RTSs go,
Warcraft, yeah, we're gonna diverge just a lot here. But screw it, because it's got to be said.
it had to
Warcraft, I
happen
think it is
eventually.
great for like the story, right? Just the playability, but StarCraft really started this whole idea of it being a competitive game and RTSs being competitive and
And
probably
just making like a unit factory.
yeah.
Like you were just trying to make the most balls crazy army to verse
And then
another balls crazy army.
spawned all kinds of crazy shit from Korea, right?
Yeah.
To start, their own leagues and the dawn of esports started
Yeah.
with StarCraft, basically. I mean, a
And I
lot of
feel like it
shooters come
also
from that, but
unfortunately killed. I don't know if it's StarCraft's fault or if it's World of Warcraft's fault for killing the RTS. I don't know. Like, 'cause StarCraft 2 is really the last real RTS, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they're there, but
With like that kind of idea in mind that okay, we're gonna have all the story campaign and all this stuff, but we're also gonna have like this highly competitive to a ridiculous point. I can't even really play well. The competitive aspect to it all.
yeah. And you know what I just noticed about this category that's really interesting? Both of these are games that people just have been asking for years. Like, people want the skating game return. People want the original RTS return. Like, both of these are being sought after right now, right?
Yeah. Which is kind of crazy that it isn't, and I understand. So like StarCraft 2, I mean, again, it's I don't think it's very accessible, right? Not compared
No.
to like probably why Warcraft met a lot of audiences because it was just more accessible in general. But then
Yeah,
Warcraft,
especially
I
with
think was
3.
Warcraft obviously started to go way more into like heroes and
Yeah, yeah,
like the RPG aspects, things that led to WoW, where StarCraft just kind of like stayed true to like just the building aspect, and you're gonna build, arming your units, and you have to micromanage
yeah.
everything.
So it led to WoW, but it also led to Dota, which
Right.
confirms Warcraft killed the RTS because it spawned Dota,
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
definitely nailed the coffin.
Yeah, but now we definitely have any developer would have been double-edged sword. Doomed if you do, doomed if you don't. It would have
Mhm.
been stupid to make an RTS as opposed to trying to just make another League of Legends or Dota at the time.
I think
Um,
so.
of course, but yeah, none of those could really compare to those two anyway. But now those are basically not dead, but they're dying out for sure.
Well, people between just
There's still
the
a lot of people that play them, right?
yeah, yeah.
But
But
you're
it
not.
it became such an inaccessible genre, like you
Yeah.
said.
Well, and that's a whole nother thing. But I think there really is a gap now for more RTS for a new
Yeah.
RTS to come
Well,
out.
we have that one coming out, Storm Gate
Oh
or
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's returning.
right.
We'll see.
I think it's a good time for it, right? If you can make one good, and obviously, I mean, in that sense, I liked Warcraft, right? But I'd rather see it like a StarCraft. For voting here, for pure nostalgia's sake, and just because
You pick what
I,
your heart tells you.
yeah, like I love what it is. I gotta go with StarCraft. It's just always been really, really cool to me.
All right. Um, I am hands down Tony Hawk.
Yeah,
That game will forever be
I
one of the
mean,
most important to me.
and I already know it's gonna win here, but
Let's see what Blaine voted for.
F the both of you.
Yep. Blaine voted for Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
No accounting for taste. Never
Matt, I
mind.
mean, this
I
is what it's like when worlds collide.
Who is alive and who is the
The
devil?
devil.
Ugh, come
This
on, let
is
me be your guide.
this is the part of the podcast where we sing terribly
Yeah.
old Tony Hawk songs. Tony Hawk advances, and then for the 12th and final seed for today, we have Soul Calibur versus Yoshi's Story. Another
So
one where like the games are so similar, I don't really know what we're gonna debate here.
yeah, right. Like a perfect pairing, like cheese and wine. These two. Yoshi's Story is definitely the cheese, and Soul Calibur is the fine wine.
Oh, here we go.
No, yeah. Honestly, Yoshi's Story is it's another like I think 60. Where we talked about, yeah,
Yeah,
64, right?
64. Yeah.
64 classic. I remember playing the game fondly as a child. I actually specifically remember playing this on vacation with like my family. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just loved that, and it had a lot of character. But I mean, we could talk about other fighting games all day, but I play fighting games because of Soul Calibur.
I mean,
So
yeah.
that was just such a big thing to me, and the Soul Calibur series was such a big thing to me for the next, decade. I, yeah, I mean, I'll just pick Soul Calibur now, call it a day.
This one's tough for me because Soul Calibur was, I'm not a big fighting game person. Soul Calibur was that game that got me because it felt good.
Yeah,
It
it was
felt pretty accessible, like the weapon combat.
it was
The
a lot
characters were awesome.
it was a lot quicker than a lot of the other titles at the time. And it was, yeah, I mean, definitely a lot less mechanically intense. Lot less, at least if you're just playing with your friends, a lot less just footsies, I really have to learn how to do these combos or something. No, you just
Yeah, yeah.
beat each other up.
You just go for it. And I mean, they explored kind of the three dimensions of the arenas, which was cool. You could go around each other, knock people off the platforms. Like that stuff was cool. It wasn't just a dodge backwards and jump forwards. It was like you could dodge to the side and hit and try to flank
Yeah.
people and hit them from their blind sides and stuff.
Which
And
I don't know when like Tekken and stuff like that came out.
yeah,
I
Tekken did that stuff too.
but again, it was a lot slower and felt a lot clunkier. I mean, Tekken's a great game to
At
meet
least
people.
until Tekken 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Soul Calibur was pretty big. Yoshi's Story, however, I don't know. There was such a departure with style in that game, and it's cute and stuff, but it's this storybook and the way that the levels kind of are so straightforward and basic, but just have so much character.
Right.
And I mean, from like sound effects and design, everything is just, I don't know, everything is just really comforting about that game. And I think that was the first time I played. It's like the first and last time I really enjoyed a Yoshi game.
Right.
I
Well,
mean, Yoshi's Island
whatever.
is good, but yeah, Yoshi 64 was just kind of Yoshi's Story was just kind of that one that I would always play, and it'd be comforting. So I'm gonna go Yoshi Story.
Okay. See, for a second, I thought I got you on the Soul Calibur train here.
Almost, it was so close.
And I was gonna be surprised if I swayed you.
It was really close. I really thought about it.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't know what Blaine picked here, so I'm a little worried, to be honest.
He picked Yoshi Story.
No, I mean, I'm not surprised at all
I know.
because he's a monument to compromise.
All right, so much to Matt's chagrin, Yoshi's Story will advance to versus Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which, come on, it's worth it for that alone.
It's Soul Calibur.
All right, well, let's do a StarCraft Soul Calibur losers bracket real quick.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say, honestly, both of those games were really just influential to me. I think.
Yeah, I
In
know.
their own way.
It didn't feel good to knock either of them off because I know that they're
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. So, like, to me personally, but whatever, it's fine.
It's fine. Matt will not be returning for episode 2.
Oh, is that gonna be? We're calling it there.
I think that's going to call it for today. We have gone through 12 seeds. The winners for today were Resident Evil 2, Pokemon Silver and Gold, Super Smash Bros., Super Metroid, Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, Pokemon Snap. A lot of Pokemon in here. People are going to think we're being paid off. Sonic Adventure, Diddy Kong Racing, Super Mario World, Final Fantasy VI, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and Yoshi's Story. So next time we will go through seeds 13 to 32. Hopefully we can get that done in one episode. I would like to.
We can speed run it.
Well, we got our rhythm a little bit, so I think we can jam through a couple of these.
Yeah.
All right, so thanks everybody for joining. We will see you next week to continue the best of the 90s bracket. Go check us out on patreon.com/thenerdinggrounds. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And just have a great week. Go play some old games from the 90s. Have fun. Try to forget about all the terrible things going on in the world. Video games can't hurt you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.